Have you already taken a drink?
Mm-hmm.
What's your initial impression?
It tastes very zouave.
Okay.
Robby liked the zouave. Welcome once again to Chill Filter, the podcast where we drink whiskey so you don't have to, but you probably should. You probably are, and that's why we like you. And on today's episode, we're coal-less once again. However, we're not lacking for intellect because I got the friggin' John Voldemort Hughes with me, and he's already like, yeah, I got the history, I got this, I got that. Like, he's on top of it because this guy's awesome from Embellishpod. Before we get more into what John's up to, how life is, how his podcast/YouTube's going, hit us up on Instagram. Cole is right now cuddling a beautiful newborn baby girl. Well, he's probably with his oldest daughter. Well, his wife is cuddling the beautiful newborn baby girl. And Cole's probably got time to chit-chat on his phone. Maybe, maybe not. So hit us up on Instagram if you want to talk to us. If you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/chillfiltered and do Cole a favor. Leave a rating and review. It's been a while. It's been a long while since someone said, you guys are awful. We'd like to hear that. Or if we're great, we'd love to hear that. Anyway, that's enough of that. John, been a little while.
It's been
When's the last time we had you on? I think, was it?
It's been a year, I think, and maybe some change.
Yeah, was it the episode we did on yours that we posted on ours? It was like Christmas 2 years ago, a year and a half ago?
No, we've done something since then, right? I'm pretty sure we've done something since then.
I hope so. We don't do stuff enough. But how you doing, man? How's life? How are things treating you? How's the podcast?
It's good that you ask about the podcast. The podcast, actually, I took like 3 months off, just sort of unplanned, right?
Yeah.
And I had a fun interview yesterday, and I had to cut some of the interview out because we got into talking about this exact subject. But I just needed some time to think about, what I was doing with the podcast because a lot of people are saying the same things. I like what you guys do. I've got 3 or 4 people that I really follow, but most of the interview style podcasts are asking the same 7 or 8 or 10 questions, and it gets sort of boring. So I took some time off, and then now I'm back. I'm back recording. I've had an episode a couple weeks ago with the guys from American Mash and Grain, and they're doing some fun stuff. Got one that'll come out probably next week or the week after with Jackie Zykan, who is formerly Old Forester, is currently doing Hidden Barn and Odu Oak, which is her own fragrance line, and a whole host of other things. And we only spent like maybe 15% of the conversation about whiskey, and the rest of it was just about other stuff. So it was super fun. I got some other fun things that are coming up. Some maybe not so directly related to whiskey items, but it's good. It's good. I'm back in the saddle, it sounds like.
So I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Your first, do I want to do this trial run first season you had? Mm-hmm. I want to see you get back to that. And then maybe like sprinkle in these dudes, but like your episodes were so friggin' informative. And I loved it, man, because you're just like your yeast episode. Every time we talk about yeast, that's the whole first thing I think about. I'm like, oh gosh, like John did a deep dive. You're good at doing deep dives into things and making them interesting, man. So like maybe
thank you.
I've got
a few of
that
those.
again.
I've got a few of those planned. Yeah, I've got a few of those
all right,
planned.
because that's what I like.
I'm trying to. The interviews aren't going to be like straight whiskey interviews. Like most of the conversation yesterday was about mental health and kind of knowing who you are, which is super great, right? It was fun. I've got a potential chef from Top Chef coming on in a couple weeks, and we'll talk about food, right? Talk about other things. But I still have a handful of the more traditional things that I did in the past. Those things are super resource intensive, man. I got to do a lot of research and writing and stuff.
You're good at it, though. Well, I mean, like maybe do like a season of that every year where you do like 5 episodes, 7 episodes.
You're hitting that. And so my intent is to sort of sprinkle them throughout the other things, and they all just sort of come along as they do. Just things happen. People come available that want to have conversations that I think they're interesting. I'll talk to them. But beyond that, I've got an Excel planning sheet full of ideas that are similar to that around different unifying things for brands.
You and I are so different. You've got the Excel spreadsheet planning things ahead. I don't do. We just wing it every week, man. Like, I wing it every week.
I have to, or I'll repeat myself. And this is, like I started doing that with my whiskey collection because then I realized I'd bought the same bottle 3 times and I had 4 of them. I'm like, I got to do somewhere to, kind of make sure I keep up with it because I know I'm not going to go back and look at my podcast episodes list. And so if I don't write it down and keep track of it, I will repeat myself. 100% will repeat myself. And so it's a necessity.
The overbuying whiskey is not like, if you're gonna have a problem, that's a good problem to have. I remember one time. Here's the thing. I'm probably repeating myself. I probably mentioned this on the podcast, but one time, first time I ever ordered, it was like 2014. First time I ever ordered. No, it's probably earlier than that, like 2012. First time I ever ordered pizza on my smartphone, and I submit it. I don't see anything. Didn't do anything. Submitted it again. Did it like 4 times. We ended up with like 12 pizzas for 3 people. And I was like, my wife was like, she was like, and then, we're early in marriage. And she's like, you spent that much money? I'm like, if we got a problem, too many pizzas is the problem to have. So, and then she got even more pissed when my buddy and I ate all of it in 3 days, 2 days or something like that.
I mean, so. There you go. You bought multiple days worth of meals. It's meal planning.
Well, it should be multiple weeks of meals.
It's pizza, though.
Well, we got to drinking and having fun that weekend, so, It happens.
At least you didn't have to throw anything in the trash, right? Like everything got...
Oh, yeah, everything.
So there's no waste. It's sustainability.
There was none. All right, so I was going to ask you about this anyway, but you already kind of mentioned it. Talking about having a top chef guy on. Talking about mental health. How good was the Bear season 2?
I love it. I absolutely loved it. But I've read a couple of articles about some advocates in the hospitality industry, and I've thought about this, and I've tried to okay, I want to read this. It's a thing that doesn't necessarily agree with me. The concern is, and spoiler alert for anybody who watches, it just kind of comes across this. You may get spoiled on the Bear, but you should still watch it. There is some degree of glorification of what happens in a professional kitchen and how hospitality workers are mistreated even by their own staff, not necessarily by patrons, but by their own staff. That demanding chef idea. Mm-hmm. It almost feels like a glorification. Now, I think the Bear does a good job of like walking the line between glorification and just pointing out like this is how the industry really is right now, and then dramatizing it for effect. But I will say, right, so I don't know if you remember the episode from season 1 where they did their online ordering for the first time, and that sound of the receipt printer just over and over again. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that they would ever be able to create an episode that was more stressful than that one for a person who's ever worked in a kitchen. Because you've heard that noise. Like if you've worked in a kitchen, you've heard the cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching as the printer comes off. But that Fishes episode... The 7 Fishes episode for Christmas time, it did it. Beautiful. Just beautiful. I had somewhat hoped, I travel for work pretty regularly, and I end up in Chicago, and I was like, man, I really hope I end up in Chicago at the same time they're filming, because I'm absolutely going to try to sneak over and get a peek at what's going on. Mm-hmm. Didn't work out that way, but I think it's a fantastic season. I hate that it was so short, and I hate that I watched it so fast.
Same. I think I started it on Tuesday and I finished it last night.
Yep.
But man, it had me like the last, like that episode. Oh gosh. As a parent, you watch the 7 Fishes episode and you're like, oh, I don't want to be like, and like, so like we talked about mental health a lot on the show and stuff like that. Like Cole and I have definitely struggled with depression and other things. And, but I watched that episode. I'm like, I don't want to be that parent. And I think of instances where I lost my cool, things like that. Like, oh my gosh. No. And then I feel like that, like where they put it in the whole season, the whole arc of the season, it was just like, what is it? Not Kingpin. It's the stone. What's the stone?
The Keystone.
The Keystone. It was the Keystone. And then like everything that came after that. And like he's polishing the forks later and stuff. And you're like, oh my God. It was so good.
It really was, and I think there's some caution in there. You're gonna do that, right? Like this is the thing. Yeah. You're going to have moments where you're gonna blow up. But that particular episode, I don't think that there is a person who has been to a family event that can't relate to some portion of it. Maybe not all of it, but there's gonna be a piece where they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I remember this time.
To that level either too, where it's like
right. It's pretty severe. but you'll be able to relate to the tension in that family moment and the way it was, and the reason why maybe you don't like some family gatherings because chaos.
I will say too, I enjoyed, and I almost felt like it was almost too much, but how many people decided like I'm gonna get on this bandwagon. Like they did an Embellish pod where like I'm just gonna ask everybody if they want to show up, and like there was so many like golly, just people I would have expected on there like or seen like Eddie Vedder must be a fan. He showed up all over that soundtrack, man. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to listen to this and that again. So,
but it was a masterful season. It's got me excited for the next one. My hope is that they understand what the length of their story is and they stop there.
Yeah.
Because there is a finite end to this, I feel like, and maybe it's 2 more seasons, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 3. I don't know, but I don't think that needs to be a forever story. But man, it's really, really, really good.
Well, I think the thing that I love most is the ensemble of it, where you have all these different stories, but they're all different but the same. Right. Yep. And it's just, I don't know. Have you seen that clip of that kid that was like, some guys like some TikToker, YouTube guys like interviewing him, and somebody walks across the screen and he's like, oh, we're just recording. You just walk across. And the kid's like, hey, we all have lives and we're just all aware of ourselves. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
And I'm like, that's how the show is. It's like, you know, you show up to work and you're like, you know, like in the back of your mind, like, I got this, that, and the other thing going on, and you lash out at times, or like you just don't like. But that's the thing about the show is just like, no, we all got stuff going on, man. Like,
yes,
we're just so aware of ourselves that it's hard to see other folks.
Yeah, and you know, in the food industry is this weird place, specifically in a restaurant like that. You know, like Applebee's, maybe not so much, but in a very thoughtful restaurant, it's a place where like, you know, business and artistry meet. And you've got to have like this sort of a beautiful mind mentality where like your brain is always thinking about something else, but you also have to make the business run. And that's restaurant industry, right? For people who work in restaurants, you know, maybe not as much McDonald's, maybe there's not as much artistry in McDonald's, but for sure in what they're doing.
You got to put a smile on those kids' face. You know, that's what it's all about. Happiness.
There's something to be said for consistency, and this is something that any distiller or chef or anybody who makes things repetitively will say is like being able to make the exact same thing over and over and over again while monotonous is also a form of artistry because you've nailed how to repeat the same thing over. It's not easy to do.
There it is, John Hughes bringing the intellect.
I don't know about intellect. You know, there may be...
No, it was very well spoken. Very well spoken. Oh, man. I was going to ask you something else, and I can't remember now. Anyway, how's life other than like TV and...
It's summertime, man. We're in the hottest part of the year. We actually have a heat warning right now, but I mean, you live in the high desert anyways, right?
Yeah.
It's just you're going to die outside.
We have had like the most normal summer so far that we've had in like 7 years. Like it's like June was like we got rain. It was like low to high 80s, kind of like never really cracked 90, which is nice. Like I'm hoping, praying like we don't get our smoke this year. Which like, have you guys gotten all that Canada smoke where you're at?
So not as much, right? So for this, there's this weird thing that's happening, right? And I have some friends and family that live in Southern Indiana, and Southern Indiana is a 2-hour drive from here. That's it. It's a very short drive. And I'm seeing pictures from Southern Indiana, and we're not having the same thing that they are. And it's just so close. It's ridiculous.
You guys don't have like mountain ranges in between or anything like that, do you?
Nope. We've got a river. I think that may be the only thing, that there's a river between us. And so maybe the cold air above the water is pushing it a different direction. I don't know. It's not really hitting us too bad, but I've seen it. And this is like, I don't know if you saw some of the pictures that came out of, Chicago, New York, whenever it hit them really hard. And it looks like, what did somebody say? It looks like a mid to late 90s movie that was set in the Mideast, right? They put that sort of like sepia tone filter on everything to make it look awful. But we're going to New York, so is this going to be a thing we're going to have to encounter while we're there? Like with my wife and I in the middle of this month.
So here's the funny thing. Like all of us folks on the West Coast are like, yeah, welcome to summer. that's
we're not used to it. Yeah, we're not used to it.
Yeah, I know. Like that's like 300, 200 miles away. Like, and that smoke's coming. I'm like, no, these are like in our backyard. Like that's how like late July to mid-September is every year almost, where it's smoky. It looks like Tatooine with the sun coming up every morning, man. It's like it's what we do. And the thing that stinks, like being a teacher, like, you know, like I will take kids outside, like play basketball, do stuff like that. I'm like, nope, can't today. Air quality, like we're stuck inside. Yep. Sorry, guys. You know, it's just yeah. So we are you know, feel bad that anyone has to go through that because it's just not fun. Right. But we're laughing at y'all. We're laughing at the East Coast, like, yeah, that's where we're at. That's us.
Yeah, and the only thing we get to laugh at you guys is if you show up in the southeast portion of the United States and get to experience humidity for real. Like that's where we get to laugh because seriously, they're two different things. It's a very different environment.
Oh, it totally is. No, we went like in Boise we'll get 105 a week where it's like just above 100. Like at nighttime, it's like 95. And like you can't open the windows and never cool down. But we went and it sucks, but like I'm okay with it. Like I'll still get stuff done and I'll mow the yard and do other stuff, go out to the park with the kids. We went to Mexico. We got back from Mexico last week. 85% humidity. I just like all I do is sweat. Like I just sweat the entire time.
And that's just where we're laughing at you. That's we're like this is, you know, Mexico is fine for us because it's the same as here. Yeah, no, man, I can't do the humidity. Like, I think at some point, if I stayed in humidity long enough, I could get used to it. I'm not gonna like it ever. It's like I look like I worked out all the time. Like, never change my clothes. You gotta have a change of clothes on a regular. You know, like that's people who live in the South that live in metropolitan cities that commute to work that by walking or whatever. I don't know how they do it. That's a completely, you know, different concern. But I prefer it because here's the thing is that we get this constant reminder to drink water because we're sweating all the time. But if I was in south of Fresno in late July, and I didn't realize, like I knew it was hot, but I never started sweating. And that never happened. And that's more dangerous. That is more dangerous.
Here's the thing, though. Do you ever get a fresh bag of chips? Because we're in Mexico, you open up a thing, like we're in the airport and like the girls got some Pringles. I'm like, these are not fresh. This is not, it's like slightly crispy. Like here, like, and like we don't, like you open a bag of chips. If you don't roll it up, you're probably fine for a week or two because it's so dry.
That's why there's a big industry for chip clips here in the South.
That's the other thing is I do have to put it like every night before I go to bed. I'll do O'Keefe's hand cream or whatever, like because my hands just dry out. In Mexico, like all my hand cracks went away. Like never use lotion.
No, you don't. It's not as much of a requirement. No.
Yeah. All right. Well, as exciting as talking about humidity, hand lotion, and chip freshness is, I think we're about time. Should we move along here and take a quick break? And then coming up, I don't know what I'm drinking. John,
big question marks.
John sent like 1 billion samples, and one of them has not just a big question mark, tiny question marks. I can't see. You can't see that.
Nope.
Like
yeah, the white balls will throw it off.
So I have no idea what I'm drinking. John's going to do the history. I'm going to do a little sipping before he gives away too much information. Unfortunately for John, I'm too dumb to probably figure out, even if you give all the history, to figure out what I'm drinking. But we'll go to break, and when we come back, I just hope this isn't John's urine. So here we go to break. And we're back. Cole usually does this, and I would be like, here's part of the show where we have the history on this, and I say this or that. I don't know what we're drinking, and John and I had a fun conversation about drinking urine off camera. So hopefully it's not.
There is no human urine content in what you're going to consume. At least if there is, we're both drinking it, and I don't know about it. So
perfect. Okay.
You have to bear with me because this one's going to be a little bit weird, and I'll tell you when to take your drink.
Weirder than what we just talked about?
Oh, it depends on what you define as weird, but for a whiskey podcast, right?
Okay.
I think this might be weird, right?
Okay.
But we're going to get some culture, too. We're going to get some culture. And, you didn't talk about, were you drinking anything on an entry bus today?
I'm going to get sick here? Like, I got to go to the doctor and get a
culture? No. Like we're gonna learn something about history today.
Oh, perfect.
So, and you can smell it if you want to, or you could even drink it if you want to. That's fine. So there's this guy named Van Gogh. Like, do you know who Van Gogh is?
You're referring to Vincent or Steve?
Vincent Willem van Gogh. He was a Dutch post-impressionist painter.
Willem van
Right?
Gogh!
Who did about 2,100 pieces of artwork in a period of about 10 years. And it sort of ties in a little bit, I guess, maybe overall with this entire conversation. But so this guy does 860 oil paintings. They date from about 2 years. There's landscapes, still lifes, portraits, self-portraits, whole bunch of stuff, right? He was born into an upper middle class family. And so, how do you draw on your tortured artist self if you didn't grow up in some sort of turmoil? But he was thought to be like a serious, quiet, and thoughtful young man. He worked as an art dealer, and I'll go ahead and tell you my source here is going to be largely Wikipedia. I trust it. It's mostly accurate. It's enough for this. Okay. But as a young man, he worked as an art dealer, and he entered into this round and bout of depression. And so this is where we start to see some of his artistic things come into play. He turned to religion at one point. He was a Protestant missionary. Didn't know about this. But, stuck predominantly in Roman Catholic southern Belgium. So I guess if you're going to be a missionary, southern Belgium is probably a pretty nice place to be. You're not having to go to somewhere where there's a bunch of yellow fever or whatever. But he started taking up painting after all of this, right? He drifted into some bad health, picked it up in 1881, moved back home with his parents, like everybody wants their kids to do, come back home. And his early works are mostly still lifes, depictions of peasant laborers, a whole bunch of different stuff like this. He kind of developed his approach to all of this artwork over a period of time. Now, there's this particular piece of artwork. Go ahead and have a drink here. Okay. It's called the Zouave, and I looked up how to pronounce that before I got on, so it is appropriate. It's spelled Zouave. And this is several sketches that Van Gogh did, and it was a model. And the Zouave was a soldier, and he did these paintings in 1881. He described him as a boy. The boy's portrayed as a soldier. He's got a face. He's got a very distinct look, and you'll get to see a picture of the image here before too long. But I can't share it with you because then you'll know what you're drinking, and we can't have that just yet. So Van Gogh actually wasn't very happy with this painting. He described it as very ugly and unsuccessful, but he liked the challenge. He thought the challenge was going to expand his mind, right? So later on, he suffers from psychotic episodes, delusions, and has a whole bunch of other problems. We're not going to go too far down that path. But so there's this painting called the Zouave. Now, have you already taken a drink?
Mm-hmm.
What's your initial impression?
It tastes very Zouave.
Okay.
Robby liked the Zouave. No, it's it might be wheated. It's kind of like a sweeter kind of a wheat to it. It's got mouthfeel is awesome. It's just very mid viscosity. It's not light. It's not heavy. It's just nice. It's like a warmed honey with a little bit of water in it. Okay. Fruit wise, you're getting like apple.
That all makes complete sense. So this is an 8-year 86 proof whiskey, right? And so it's not super high proof, but to carry the mouthfeel is pretty interesting. So what does the Zouave have to do with anything else? So the Zouave is this painting that Van Gogh himself doesn't care for. In 1966, Jim Beam introduces some long-running collections. They were called Beam Collector Editions, and they ran from about 66 to 86. So you got 20 years worth of stuff. Okay. So we're looking at this time frame wise, like this is a time when whiskey consumption is on the decline, and they're trying to find interesting and unique ways to draw people in to buy whiskey. So they make all of these special editions, right? And so in the first run of these things, they would introduce a kind of a new collection under this particular heading, the Beam Collector's Editions. The first was a series of 4 different bottlings with paintings from famous artists. They were put in these boxes, and some of these are relatively ugly, but this was an interesting way to try to bring forth more sales effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what you're looking at. So what you have in your glass is a I shared this. Now you're gonna have to probably put it up.
I
got to
add it in here. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's gonna. Yeah, there you go. So this is a 1969 Jim Beam decanter.
Okay.
Right.
Is that what we're drinking?
This is what we're drinking.
Oh my gosh.
This is what is in your glass is a 1969 Jim Beam decanter. And the reason we're talking about the Zouave is because that's the particular edition that this one was, right? So what made it interesting to me was this, number one, I mean, it's old whiskey, right? So we can talk about a couple of things that are in there. But this is a painting that Van Gogh doesn't like, but Jim Beam picked it to put on this ugly-ass bottle. Sorry, I said a word, now you got the explicit there. But the bottle is just, it's not an attractive bottle. It looks like it might be the internal organ of a cow.
Yeah, I could see. It looks like a burnt chicken leg with thigh.
Yes, so a haunch, so to speak. Maybe a haunch of an animal. Perfect.
Yeah, okay, haunch.
So this is what you have, right? This is what you're drinking. Like I said, 8-year, 86 proof. And the other thing that makes these things kind of interesting, and I think the reason they're able to make the mouthfeel feel the way it does, has more to do with the trees that make up the barrels than anything else. But these were popular for collectors beyond whiskey. That's why there's a whole bunch of these that still exist that still have whiskey in them, right? And luckily I took this picture right before I accidentally tore that label in half that's right there on Beam's Choice. So we got perfect evidence. So now we're done with the history on this. This is Jim Beam doing Jim Beam's things. Now we're on to what you think.
So all right, so it was 1966. You said
69.
1969
is when this was bottled. Exactly.
What year? Yeah. So I gotta say, I would not have thought I was drinking something that old, because the episode, I just can't remember what it was. Cole got me it was an old bottle. It was older than this, but it tasted musty. It didn't this has like no indication that this wasn't bottled recently at all. Like, right. I can't believe it's that old, first of all. And I'm gonna skip to my rating that I had in my mind right now. I'm giving this a 9.3. It is, like I said, the mouthfeel is just on point. It's not too viscous. It's not too light. It's great. I thought the proof was a little bit higher. I thought I was being a little tricked by it. But 86 for an 86 proofer, like, this is an easy sipper. Here's the problem. I don't want to add water. I don't want to add ice to this. Like, it is really good as is. It's just a really good bourbon. Is this weeded? Is there any wheat in it?
So there's a lot of question on what this mash bill is, right?
Okay.
Because they did some transition. I mean, history records aren't the greatest, right? So if you think about when this was distilled, this is a 1969 bottling, and it's 8 years old. So it was distilled in 61 or 60 or 61. And so knowing for sure when they transitioned from one to the other, is the record accurate? I don't know. I haven't tried to look up the 1960 or 61 mash bill, but I don't know that it was heavily wheated. I know they had started introducing rye at that point, a little more heavily. So
no, it's lightly sweet. It's not over. It doesn't taste over oaked or anything like that. It's just, no, this is really good. I can't believe you shared this. Are you sipping some right now too? Mm-hmm. Okay. What are your thoughts?
You guys got the first and second pours out of this one.
So did Cole get the question mark too?
Yeah, he got the exact same thing. So that way he can, maybe he listens to this episode and he can sip along and get the experience himself. I'm trying to see if it has. I think that's the new mash bill, because this is talking about brown rice, and I'm pretty sure they weren't doing brown rice in. So I really enjoy, this is my second decanter of Beam that I've had. And the thing is, these Beam decanters, the state of Kentucky passed a law to allow for vintage alcohol sales. And so you can go to a store. There's a couple stores here in the state where you can go and pick up these decanters. And those stores are then required to try to make sure that the provenance is accurate and that it was never opened or whatever. I find them to be fun and interesting and unique. And I think, and this is what I attribute it to, number one, industrial processes weren't exactly the same in the 60s as they are now, right? So they were probably a little more loosey-goosey. But beyond that, this is what I try to spend at least most of my time thinking about. And the trees that went into making the barrels of this were harvested probably sometime in the late 50s. And most of the trees at that point in time were considered old growth, and so had much tighter ring patterns. They were grown in the wild, and so they were more resilient. how the whiskey interacted with the barrel would have been incredibly different and something that we couldn't necessarily recreate now. Just based off of industrial practices, yeast things, it feels like capturing history in a bottle. And I've had some that have been terrible. I've got one that's not a beam that was another one that I don't think is super great. They can get real varnishy. But I think this particular bottle is one of the better ones. I didn't try it until today either.
Oh, really? Okay. No,
yeah.
It's delicious.
Yeah, I poured y'all 2 samples and then didn't touch it again.
Oh, you're a good man. So I actually have similar. That's a 70-71.
Mm-hmm.
If I can focus that. Nebraska National Championship Jim Beam bottle. There's nothing in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've ever taken the cork off. I'm gonna give this a smell. So it's not too far, but this is only aged 130 months. I don't know math.
130. That's over 10 years.
Oh, okay. I
130. So that's 10 years and 10 months. Is that right? Because 120.
Dude, I'm not the math guy. Let's got Coach Bob Devaney on it. I'm not
even
I
assume as a Nebraska person, that's the reason for.
That's one of my favorite keepsakes. Yeah, no.
Yep.
There's nothing in it. It got drank-ed a long time ago, but I love they're fun. So.
Oh yeah, some of them are. Some of them are absolutely ugly, and that's what this is one of the ugly ones. And the one that I had before it was like a wildlife piece of artwork. It was in the 70s, I think, is what it was. But no, I think they're fun. They're interesting. They're unique. But yeah, you've got to do the water pour. You've got to do the ice. This is chill filter.
I know. I've got to now. Yeah. If I did, it's. So I added some water. I get a little bit more of the apple on the nose. A little bit vapor.
Yeah, and this is what I worry about, right? Because it is an 86 proof whiskey. As soon as you start adding water to it, is it going to disappear? Is the mouthfeel going to disappear? And I don't know yet. That's why I'm adding my water in right now and seeing how this goes.
So I think what I'm going to do is as soon as we get done, if I can find time, I'm going to edit this, upload it, and send Cole like the digital copy because I feel like this is something he may want to drink as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. Like this is it's really good. All right, going for a taste. Get a little bit. There's a little bitterness there for me. I get a little medicinal.
I think it goes more oaky for sure. Yeah, the bitterness, like oak tannins.
Yeah, look at you, man. Oak tannins. So here's the thing: you got to get on Matt Madness. Like I could see you doing a deep run, and your comedic and humor, I think, is understated. Like it's just like it's a little underwhelming in delivery. Sorry. But
no, I understand. Understated.
But
understated?
It's quality. It's it hits. Like it comes. Like I am like stupid, gregarious, blah, like fart jokes. And here's
the thing: is that your comedy's going to sell. There's a reason why people are still talking about Matt Madness season 1 with the Grease. Mm-hmm. Because it was an understated humor that did that. That is straight up. Yeah. 1980s and 90s wrestling heel methodology. It was.
Oh man, I've been down this rabbit hole of Randy Macho Man Savage clips, man. Oh yeah,
it was a great time to grow up, man.
The Macho Man cries, but a Macho Man can cry. I've cried 1,000 times before, and I'll cry again. I don't know.
It was an amazing time to grow up whenever things like that were happening.
Oh my gosh! So were you a wrestling fan?
I wasn't like a huge wrestling fan. It was if it's on, I'll watch it. If it's not, I'm not gonna like seek it out. But my grandfather was like an absolute. Which
really
you have to think geographically, right? So we're in southwestern Kentucky. We're 2.5 hours from Memphis, and Memphis is home to some of the most original wrestling that there was.
I got you.
Right? And so my grandfather's attachment was probably from years and years before, enough to where like he would sit in his recliner and he would like shift like he was actually in the wrestling ring with people while it was happening. It was a whole interesting.
It's like
thing.
When you used to play Nintendo as a kid. Like,
yes, and you would jump. You would jump whenever Mario would jump or whatever. Absolutely, he was doing that, for sure. And so, but it was, it was an introduction to theater, effectively, right? Like it's an introduction to theater to people. Sorry, I just looked up and I saw you shoot ice across the house.
No, it is. It's like soap opera with macho men. Yeah, it really is. I loved it. I was always like WCW Saturday mornings. I got to see Sting fight Ric Flair. That was my thing growing up. And then going to the front yard right afterwards with my neighbor Sam and his little brother Matt, and we get in trouble for hurting one. Somebody would get in trouble for hurting somebody. I tell you what, my leg lock, I still am proud of my leg lock. Like I could choke a kid out with my leg lock. It was great.
There may have been a time in college where I threw one of my friends into a Boston Crab, and so it sticks around for a while.
All right, nose with ice, muted, slightly sweet, not much else. Too light. Way too light.
I think we're on a degrading performance. We started at the apex, and we're working our way down
Absolutely.
to a lower score for sure.
It's almost like it doesn't have white wine flavors, but it's got like a white wine spritzer quality to it, where it's just like.
I get that, yeah, because you can get some dryness that comes in because we're getting rid of some of the sweeter flavors. Maybe a whiskey Aperol spritz.
Yeah, it's way too light. I saved the last little bit to go back to neat here, so.
I mean, that doesn't mean there can't be another hand-delivered package with more of this in it.
Well, I would not push you to do that because this is I've experienced it. I'm happy. I can move on. You're the best, John. Seriously.
I mean, I bought this with the intent to share it with the appropriate kind of people because there are select few people who are going to appreciate this, right? Like a lot of people, they're like, let me find the Pappies and the Wellers of the world, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with those things, but this is fun. This is interesting. It's something that is non-recreatable at this point in time.
I'll probably never have it again, and I'm happy that I just had it, man. I appreciate you for sharing. And that's the thing. It's like our episode that we did on Matt Madness. They were, I can't remember the names. They were down in Florida with, the husband and wife,
Dan and Julie,
and Dan, like as it goes along, Dan's just pulling off like I think he had a Pappy or something like that, some antique collection, and he's just sipping from it. I'm like, whatever, like that's how it goes. And he's pouring huge pours for Matt and stuff. And like I was looking at the comments, and someone was like, "This is disgusting, wasting whiskey like that." And I was like, because I'm vain, so I looked at the comments, but I pull up, I'm like, no, this is how it is. Like when you get around people who have a good appreciation for the same thing, like whiskey, and you start drinking the whiskey, by the end of the night, bottle chugs, deep pours, it's just how it goes, man. You just share with people who love it.
What is the point of hoarding it and keeping it? And I say that fully aware that there's a lot of hoarding that happens directly behind me, but in the same vein, and I'll 100% have a conversation about the likes. Because I like Dan and Julie. I've met them in person a couple of times. They're super, super people, and they'll share anything with you, right? I've got an early bookers that they sent to me as a part of a giveaway for a thing they were doing because they share their things, right? And so if they have something, it's similar to anybody that you show up that's, kind of a real appreciator. You show up at their house and like, hey, what can I try? And they'll say anything. If it's open, let's drink it, right? Because that's what the point of it all is. And if it's not open, maybe we'll go ahead and open it. And if that means drinking it straight from the bottle, if that means putting it on, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
But it does matter who you share it with. It doesn't matter how you share it, right? Like,
absolutely.
Like
you get a sense for the wrong people.
And like the thing is, so I'm sure you've done this or had this happen where someone shows up and they're like, I like whiskey. Like, oh, okay. And you kind of start with that like medium tier that is pretty special, but it's not like you give it to them and they're like, oh, okay. Thanks for the and like they move on. You're like, okay, we're not going any higher than that. Like,
well, I usually start with, okay, what do you like? Like what do you drink? What is it that you buy? Because luckily enough, like most everything is up here, and this is in my office space, and our communal areas are downstairs, and so I would have to invite them up there for them to see anything. So it's more of a, okay, where are you at? Because there's no, if you're really, really into low proof wheated whiskeys, right? There's no sense in me pulling out a hazmat rye whiskey unless you're trying to learn something new, right? And then somebody says, I want you to teach you. So, okay, now we've opened the floodgates. But if you just, I want to drink a bottle. I had a bottle of Old Rip, 5-7 years ago, and we had some friends, coworkers come in from Eastern Europe. So I brought that over because that's a bottle they can take a picture with. They can send it back to their friends, and their friends, it's a clout thing. It's a thing they can share with. They can give two shits what it tasted like. So it's just a fun experience.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. All right. Rating on best pour. I already gave mine. I'm giving the neat a 9.3. Again, after that,
Yep.
And I feel like I even said, I'm like, I don't want to add ice. I don't want to add water. You made me do it. You're a man of high standards. I appreciate that. But neat was the best. I'm giving it a 9.3. It was mouthfeel on point. It nice sweetness. It was nothing like overwhelming in any direction. It was just delicious. And I think like if I could have this be like the standard bourbon, I would drink this every day. I'm not a huge bourbon guy. I do like bourbon. I prefer I prefer rye a little bit more. Like sometimes bourbons can be way too sweet for me. This was perfect. I loved it. 9.3. What do you got, John?
I waver between like an 8.6 and an 8.7 for me.
Okay.
And the big thing is that it really boils down to proof for me. Like just personally, I really, really like proof, and I need it to, either blow out my mouth or create a drying sensation. And it's on the edge of that, but it's fantastic. I don't feel bad about the money that I spent for it. They're not even that expensive. They're really not. And so, yeah, 8.6, 8.7. So we'll call it 8.7. I'm fine. I'll round up.
So do you like sweet bourbons in? Or like, what do you like? What do you look for in a? So you want like proofage? You want to either blow you out or get?
I would like. I'm aware of how problematic that statement is, and I was aware when I said it. Honestly, it doesn't have to be super sweet. I really like. So I'll tell you, there was this time in college when I was like, I'm going to get into wine. I want to drink wine, right? And you start with red wines because you're a guy and that's what you do. And I like super, super dry red wines. So what that translates into is that I like a whiskey that is going to create a pretty tannic and drying reaction. And a lot of times that ends up being in the rye family. I don't care if it's a rye. I don't care if it's a bourbon. I don't like the ones that are sickly sweet. I had a Widow Jane Decadence, which is like finished in maple syrup barrels, and I had the Belle Meade, which was finished in honey barrels, and they were delicious. They were delicious. But, I mean, I'm not trying to get diabetes from drinking whiskey. Well, give me something that's got a little bit more to it. And it may be an advancement of where I am in drinking, but I like red wine finished ones. So I started the day with a Amontillado finished whiskey, right? Which is red wine, and it's gonna create a more meaty mouthfeel. So that's where I was.
You started the day wanting a meaty mouthfeel.
Absolutely, gotcha. Yes. I started. Well, I knew that I was gonna be on with Big Rob, so I needed to make sure that I had explored all of my mouth with a meaty feel.
Well, alrighty. I only wish my wife would wake up feeling that way. All right. That being said, it's probably time we move things along here. We'll go to the next portion of the show. We like to call a Whiskey World News. And we're back. It's been a little bit of a break here on Whiskey World News break. John and I talking off camera, off mic, on mic, but we're not publishing it because you know what? That's a time between
friends.
Bourbons with friends. Yep. And anyway, part of the show we have to call Whiskey World News. Part of the show we read an article, didn't read, gonna write. Nope, gonna read it, didn't write it. Here we go. And I have a feeling like you're gonna have some good thoughts on this because you're a thoughtful man, and this is like very low-hanging fruit. This comes from The Observer, written by Alyssa Fitzgerald, entitled "The Celebrity Whiskey Brands That Are Actually Worth Drinking." And I'm not even going to read what she says about. I'm just going to list them off here. First one, David Beckham's Hague Club Clubman. It's a light, unpeated Scotch whiskey that aims to win over newcomers to the spirit. Have you had it? Any thoughts on that? None.
I haven't. Yeah, no, I have no thoughts, but I would guess just based off of my own suspicion, is that it is going to be a very similar play to like Proper 12, where it's a guy with a big name that's trying to create a big brand to then sell it. You know, like what Clooney did that. Somebody else did it. I don't know. That would be my guess.
Okay. Next one. Leaf Schreiber's Slaint Irish Whiskey. Irish whiskey is always a good call. And with Slaint, what is it?
Sleonte?
Sleonte?
Is it Slinte?
With it, yep.
There's a specific pronunciation of that, and I am too Western Kentucky to know.
Yeah.
Is it
Any thoughts
Slaunch?
Yeah, I know it's like the Cheers thing. That's what they do in Ireland. Next one here is Conor McGregor's Proper 12. Got your thoughts on that? Nick Offerman's Lagavulin Charred Oak Cask. Any thoughts there?
So that one is the most real of them. And the reason I say that is that it is no secret. And I had a conversation with one of my episodes where like a dream interview is Nick Offerman talking about his Lagavulin series. Mm-hmm. But like he has such a high affinity for it. It's even written into an episode of Parks and Recreation, right?
Yep.
Like he visits the Lagavulin distillery, and I can only guess that like that entire Go to Europe portion of Parks and Recreation was just to get a paid for trip to go over to Lagavulin, and I appreciate that. But he doesn't make any bones about, like this is Lagavulin. It's just sort of selected for me. He's not trying to like create some story where it's my brand, blah blah. He's just partnering, and that one I'm on board with. I've had a couple of different versions of it. It's fantastic, but I mean you're starting with Lagavulin, which is already fantastic. So,
yep. Next one, Blackened American Whiskey. I've never actually had Blackened. Have you? I'm sure you have. You have.
So I have, and I talked about this one on an episode as well because it's a unique aging style. And so, do you know anything about Blackened?
I know not too much. I just know that they do like the sound waves with.
Right. So each batch has a playlist that goes along with it, right? And that's the music that was played to it. And now there is some science behind the idea of sound waves and how it impacts wood. And I'll say this, and I'm going to run this out way long, so I apologize ahead of time.
No,
we've got a little bit of time to spend.
We got for you, we got all the time in the world.
There's
a birthday lunch.
So Alvarez Guitars, right? Alvarez Guitars did a series called Yayaris back in the 90s. And basically the idea is they took all of these guitar bodies and they would put them inside of a chamber and blast music at them for 8 or 10 or 12 months continuously, with the idea that over time the sound waves would change the structure of the wood and make it more of a rich tone. Right? So this is a thing that actually does happen. And I've heard the difference between a standard Alvarez and one that's a Yayari. And Yayari is I think it's Japanese, and I could be wrong, but it's somewhere in Asia. But I'm pretty sure it's a Japanese process. It's a whole thing. The sound waves can't do anything but impact it further. Now, is it good or bad? That's a different conversation. But I enjoy what they're doing. They're very transparent about the whole situation. What they're picking up their whiskey. And they're putting it in these casks and they're blasting music at it for a while. And even if it comes out just as standard whiskey, it's not priced super crazy. And you get a playlist to listen to it, and it's Metallica music while you drink whiskey. So that could end really well or really poorly. So choose your own adventure.
You didn't cheat on those books. I always cheated on the choose your own adventures. I choose my adventure.
All of the endings.
Screw that! I'm going back. I didn't choose that one. I made
absolutely no. I did that because I needed to know. Like I needed to know what the other options were.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next one, brother. Now this is good. Like celebrity whiskeys. I don't know because this is not my thing. Brothers Bond. The bond between Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley formed on the Vampire Diaries after the CW show ended. Is this a thing to you?
So I know about this. I haven't had this. And I think that it's, from what I understand, it's like mediocre whiskey. But it got a whole lot of like teenage girls interested in whiskey. And so kudos to them because the Vampire Diaries and the connection to that. I haven't heard anything necessarily bad about it, but I haven't heard anything resoundingly good to the point where I'm going to search it out, right? Like so far, I've had Lagavulin. I have a bottle of Blackened. I do not have Brothers Bond, and it's not because I've never seen it. I've seen it a bunch of places. I just haven't bought one because it doesn't seem that interesting.
What a great answer. And way to keep talking while I had to get up and let the dogs out so they stopped barking. You are a scholar and a gentleman. Last one here. Sassenach blended Scotch whiskey. In Scottish Gaelic, Sassenach means outsider or nonconformist. On the Star series Outlander, Sam Hughes, Hugin's 18th century character Sam Friggen used it as an affectionate name for his on-screen love interest. It's a blended Scotch whiskey named as a cheeky tribute to the show. Any thoughts there, John?
I need you to spell that again.
Sassenach. Sassenach.
So that's the first one that I don't know anything about on this list. Like the rest of them I sort of know about, but like I don't know. I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't know.
Do you watch Outlander?
I don't, but I know a lot of people are really passionate about it.
Did your wife watch Outlander?
No, she doesn't. She doesn't like to watch anything new. And that sounds terrible, but like she likes to watch the same thing over and over again because she knows what's going to happen.
My wife loves period piece things.
Mm-hmm.
We watch Pride. Like I don't mind Pride and Prejudice, but we watch it like 3 times a year. Right? I mean, it's fine. And like the part that always gets me is there's the scene where she's like in a gazebo and he comes out and it's very dramatic. I'm like, this is the end of the movie every single time. I know it's not the end. But I'm like, this should have been the end of the movie.
They get you. They fooled you. That's good cinematography right there. Even when you know that it's not the end, you still think it is.
I feel like it should be. Anyway, all right, John. Here's a question that we've had on the show before, but we haven't had your perspective. If you, for what whiskey, and we don't have anything from last week because we're pre-recording these things, and by the time this airs, I think I'm in Yellowstone with my girls. Wish me luck. It's just me and the girls in a Mercedes camper van. It could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It could be black and whiskey. We'll find out. But if you were going to have a celebrity whiskey line, what celebrity and what type of whiskey would you choose to have?
What celebrity? That's a tough one, right? Because I do want to lean into like Nick Offerman. Ron Swanson is my spirit animal through and through, right? And so that already exists. So I need to find a new one. But then there's also this Sweetens Cove thing, which everybody's sort of dumped on. But there's a musician named Drew Holcomb who is involved with that project as well. And I really, really like him. He's the first legitimate concert that my children ever went to. It's an Americana artist. Fantastic. What famous person would be the best person to try to build a whiskey brand with? I don't know, man. That's a tough question.
I'll give you a little more time to think.
Give me a half a second.
So, like, I'm going to go one way, but then I'm coming back another. I love music. I do. And I love Dave Grohl. I think Dave Grohl, like, just is, like, the coolest dude ever. I just, like...
Thanks, man. That's I can't beat that answer.
Well,
I can't.
But I'm not going to go with Dave Grohl.
Okay.
I would like if I could hang out with anybody right now, it'd probably be Dave Grohl. However, I'm going with someone who's already dead, and it's another rock and roll icon. I just watched the recent documentary on Little Richard, and I'm like, dude was crazy amazing. And I would go Little Richard with Little Book. Is it Little Book? Is that the name of the bourbon?
Yep.
It'd be Little Richard, Little Book.
See, you didn't tell me dead people were an option either.
Dead people are options, man.
Now I've got to, like, my
It's
brain
the world
is just
of whiskey.
broken.
They revive dead people's legacies all the time.
See, because then when you start talking about dead people, then I'm like, okay, no, I've got to start thinking about Kurt Cobain because, like, you know, Nirvana was a big thing for me in middle school. But
Wait,
then
say
like,
the band name again.
Kurt Cobain, just Kurt Cobain.
What's the band name?
Nirvana.
Okay, I said Nirvana. I'm like,
I didn't say his name. I didn't say the band name at all. I just said Kurt Cobain.
Okay, so Kurt.
Did
Cobain.
I say that? I don't think I did.
You said it. Maybe I'm.
Anyways, I probably mumbled through something else. But then I think, like, I don't think he would be a good selection for, like, building a whiskey brand off of because he'd probably be like, let's make some, like rum-aged absinthe or something just super esoteric that, like, would be interesting to explore. Man, you threw me with the dead people thing. The dead people just threw me.
Okay,
so I'm gonna steal this. I'm gonna stay in music.
Okay.
And I'm gonna shamelessly self promote. Is what I'm gonna do here.
All right.
So a few episodes, maybe a year ago, I did an episode with a guy named Propaganda, and he is a hip hop artist, and I followed him musically for a very, very long time as an educator. He's got a song called Board of Education, but it's B-O-R-E-D, Board of Education. You need to go listen to it. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it as an educator. But he's also like super coffee geek and a little bit of whiskey geek. So I would be like, all right, Prop. Real name's Jason. Like, what? Let's build a whiskey brand, and we may only sell 3 bottles, but I think it would be a fun time.
Okay, I like that. Woo! That's my little Richard. I probably blew out the. I got it.
Nah, it wasn't too bad. I've got an earpod in, and it didn't destroy my eardrum, so we're fine.
Sounds good. All right, well, we'll post that this week. Again, we're bad at social. I'm bad at. John's pretty good at social media stuff. Chill Filtered is not so great. So who knows if these results will ever come out? Or you're way better than us. I'll tell you that much. But we'll post that. And you know what, man? I appreciate you coming on. You have an open invitation anytime. If you're ever just like, you know what, I want to do an episode with you guys, let us know. We're in for it, man. So
we have to all 3 get together again. We're gonna have to spend some time together.
Oh, it's fun.
You know, we'll work something out. Maybe I'll put together a blind flight and send over, and we'll do another one.
I mean, you just send us a billion things. Like we'll just get on and do at least 1 or 2 or 3 of those, man. I love having you on the show. You're a natural fit. I think I said it. I don't know if I've said it on air. I've said it to you, but like when Cole was about to have his first kid, I was like, we might need to bring in a 3rd person just to make sure we can get episodes recorded every week. And you were like, number 1, top of the heap, because you fit in, man.
I'm always available. You guys were a thing I was listening to before I was doing this. So.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Well, I hope you had a good time, John. I hope listeners may have some chance to get a haunch of this Jim Beam bottle Van Gogh thing, because it was... Listeners, I hope our love of whiskey lifted your spirits.
Like I've accidentally had like cigarette ash water in my mouth before.
Oh yeah,
but never someone else's urine. Like I understand how this happens with like.
Have you had your own urine in your mouth?
Not that I can remember, but